Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight on the Equal Rights Amendment. The ERA was first proposed in 1923 to change the U.S. Constitution and guarantee equal legal rights for all American citizens, regardless of sex. It needed ratification from 38 states and failed to do so by the first deadline in 1979. Congress extended the deadline multiple times, and fourth wave feminism, along with the Me Too movement, revived interest in the ERA in the 2010s. But after Virginia claimed to be the 38th state needed to ratify the ERA in 2020, there's now debate over its legality due to expired deadlines and 5 states previously revoking its ratifications. Tonight, we'd like to discuss and address both sides of the argument and allow you to decide for yourself. We begin with the opposition. In a statement to ABC4 News, Gayle Ruzicka from Utah Eagle Forum writes in part, quote, "The ERA is very poorly written and does not allow for the biological differences between men and women, such as special accommodations in the workplace for women who are pregnant, or the elimination of state labor laws that protect women who do dangerously heavy work." She also goes on to say, quote, "The second line of the ERA gives Congress the power to enforce the provisions of the ERA through laws passed by Congress. Why would any legislator vote to give away our state's rights in these very personal areas? The ERA hurts women. It does not do anything to help women." We will dive into more of her arguments throughout the discussion. Now to the supporting side. Kicking off our conversation tonight is Tiffany Chan, Vice President of University Relations for the Associated Students for the University of Utah. Tiffany, thanks for joining us tonight and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Now, Tiffany, opponents of the ERA state that women are already guaranteed equal pay through the Equal Pay Act of 1963, and the current quoted wage gap between men and women is a misunderstood statistic. But you disagree and say that there is still a gender equality gap in the country and here in Utah. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so firstly on the Equal Pay Act, so basically there's already an affirmative clause in that act saying that men and women can still have gender inequality pay, just because there is an argument saying that you can have any other factors other than sex that allows you to have gender inequality pay gaps. So because of this Equal Pay Act doesn't really do anything for equality. It doesn't really do anything for the pay gap between men and women. So it still stands today. And if you can see through the economic analyses of Utah's income gaps, you can still see that these things are true, and it's a reality for many women today. The Equal Rights Amendment protects women in these ways and allows for these legal protections to continue to be a reality for these women.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Utah Eagle Forum, both conservative organizations and agencies, they see the ERA as a threat to family values and the role of women. How do you view the religious conversation about the ERA?
Right, and the religious perception about the ERA is that it's an attack on family and the role of women in these families, because they see that the role of women in these families is to promote family values, is to promote, generational prosperity. But what we really see that this is also an attack on trans youth as well, and also trans women, because they see that this ERA is a promotion of lesbian or gay sexual acts. But we obviously don't see that, because this ERA at its simplest is about basic protection and legal protections for women in the workplace, and legal battles when it comes to like a marriage and divorce. And so therefore we don't really see how the religious perception of the ERA really stands, because a lot of it is coming from homophobic and transphobic sentiments.
Tiffany, how are we seeing youth involvement, participation, and mobilization when it comes to the ERA?
Yeah, and like you said before, there are a lot of mobilization efforts when it comes to the ERA. Like Virginia just ratified the ERA, but there are a lot of concerns about the legality of it. So there's a lot of youth involvement in it currently nationally with the Generation Ratify, and then also here in Utah, considering that Utah has not ratified the ERA still. In one of my projects that I'm doing for my school, I am pursuing on educating and engaging youth on legislative advocacy with the Utah ERA Coalition, and my community partner is Kelly Jones. And so I'm grateful for how the youth can be can mobilize in order to advocate for the ERA in this upcoming legislative session, because it's more important than ever, and we see that there is a rise in sexual assault, domestic violence, dating culture on campus, and also because of COVID.
Tiffany, we have time for final words. What would you like to leave our viewers with, or what's your message to other young adults when they're thinking about the ERA?
First thing I would say is to do your research, look at what the ERA really does for you, and also put this into the context of the status quo. What does this look like for domestic violence for women? What does this look like for legal protections for women, or the gender equality pay gap, that kind of thing? And so once you put this into perspective, you can see that the ERA is just the basic minimum for gender equality here in the US and also here in Utah. Utah is dead last in gender equality, and we have the capacities to change that once you do your research and you believe in the causes of the ERA.
You've been hearing from Tiffany Chan, Vice President of University Relations for the Associated Students of the University of Utah. Tiffany, thanks for being a part of our conversation tonight.
Thank you, Rosie.
We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on the Equal Rights Amendment. Up next in our conversation is Emily Bell McCormick, founder of the Policy Project, and Kelly Whited-Jones, chairwoman of the Utah Equal Rights Amendment Coalition. Emily and Kelly, thanks for being here tonight, and welcome both to the show.
Thank you.
Let's start with you, Emily. Many laws have been passed to help equalize society. Why is the ERA still needed, and how does it fit in with those other laws?
That's such a good question. You know, we get a lot of the time, we have people when they want to talk about the ERA say things like, you know, I feel equal. Don't we have equality? And the answer is there have been many laws, many statutes passed that have worked to equalize women, but they're all temporary. So the Equal Rights Amendment is an interesting law because it's actually a constitutional amendment, and some people don't recognize that. So it's changing our constitution to say that women are looked at equally under the law. So the entire purpose of the ERA is to make sure that it's an unchangeable law. If something is in our constitution, it cannot be amended, it cannot be changed. All of the other laws that we have right now that protect women are in theory temporary, like a legislature or Congress, or someone could change them at any time. So it's necessary that we have that constitutional protection.
Emily, if the ERA is so needed, why hasn't it been ratified before? Can you talk about the history of the ERA movement?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the ERA was actually a follow-up to women getting the right to vote in 1920. So you think of like, okay, 1920, it was a long time for women to wait from our nation's founding in 1776 to 1920 for us to get the right to vote. The idea behind the ERA was Alice Paul, the woman who wrote this amendment, was actually thinking of this as a follow-up to women's right to vote. So it was meant to be, okay, look, we've got the right to vote, but now we need constitutional guarantees that we have equal access to the law. So in theory, women were never actually included in our Constitution, as crazy as that sounds. We were included with a right to vote. But what this was essentially, this needed to be the follow-up to guarantee us that we had the same protections as men did. Now, in the 1970s, you know, this actually started on both major political parties' platforms. So Republicans and Democrats were both pro-ERA. And then around the 1970s, when we were looking at really like ratifying this and getting things done, there was a big surge at that time. There was just an incredible campaign, marketing campaign, propaganda campaign that said, hey, if we do this for women, we're going to end up having shared bathrooms. We're going to have gay marriage. Women are going to be fighting in the military. This will ultimately like alter the state of women. There will be abortion on every street corner. You know, there were kind of all these fears wrapped into this kind of PR campaign against the ERA. Now we realize, you know, fast forward to 2021, here we are sitting here. We actually have those things, right? We have legalized gay marriage. We have women in the military. We have those things that happened without ERA. So as we're seeing, that wasn't actually what the ERA was about. It's about giving us constitutional protections.
And Kelly, I promise we'll get to you in just a second to dive into a little bit more about about the things that Emily said, but Emily, real quick, what were some of the original arguments against the ERA?
Yeah, so they're the things that I just mentioned. Really a lot of fear around this is going to alter the state of women. So once this ERA is passed, there was a lot of fear that women would be like, I'm out, I don't want to have children, I want to, like, because we share a bathroom, or because some, people, because there's gay marriage, or because some women may want to fight in the military, that this would fundamentally alter the state of women, that they would no longer want to, have children or be in families or things like that. That was the big fear with this. And again, we've seen that those just weren't accurate, they just weren't right.
So Kelly, let's talk about that. I mean, when I talk to groups who oppose the ERA, one of the concerns that they brought forth is that the ERA would overturn laws and practices that benefit women who may be pregnant, working in heavy manual jobs, stay-at-home moms, divorcees. What's your response to that concern?
My response would be that the Equal Rights Amendment, once passed, would really support women in every venue where they are. So at home, it would be supportive of them there in terms of domestic violence, right? As we look and see that our state, Utah in particular, is higher than the national average for domestic violence. So when we look at how women at home would benefit, that's a way that they would benefit. Women in the workplace, certainly women are in every job and are capable of performing every job. And so they need, though, to still have the protections provided by the Equal Rights Amendment to support them as they look to advance in their careers, as they look for, obviously, pay equity is an issue still that we're concerned with. And then also as women are in the military, or even here in our state as women run for political office. We've seen just this last year where that became an issue. For Democrats, they've dealt with that issue. For Republicans, they've dealt with that as well. How can we support women in all of the places that they reside?
All right, Emily and Kelly, hold that thought. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
All right, picking up now on our In Focus discussion tonight on the Equal Rights Amendment. Before the break, we were joined by Emily Bell McCormick, founder of the Policy Project, and Kelly Whited-Jones, chairwoman of the Utah Equal Rights Amendment Coalition. We pick up now right where we left off. Kelly, opponents also state that one of their concerns is that the ERA would grant equal access to women's prisons, shelters, sport teams, restrooms, locker rooms for transgender women. What is your response to that concern?
I think their concern is a little misguided in the sense that isn't the ability to use a restroom in a public space a fundamental right that we all should have? When we start to limit the ability of folks to use the restroom, we basically are saying that they cannot be in our public spaces. And that's really the wrong message to be sending. So we certainly are hopeful that we can have creative solutions. You see corporations looking at this issue right now and essentially just making another bathroom, making it available and accessible to all people. And certainly that is a fundamental right. So the Equal Rights Amendment is unlikely to really touch on that because privacy law has really been the impetus for bathroom laws, and those efforts, I think, to limit access to restrooms has been struck down time and time again.
Kelly, your upbringing was in the LDS Church. How does your faith play a role in the work that you do with the ERA?
Oh, it plays a very important role for me. I grew up with the tenets of fairness, of individual worth, recognizing that all are alike unto God, and so recognizing that when I look at someone, I try to see them for the inherent value that they have and not focus necessarily on some of the other aspects. And so I think that has informed me very, very much. And some of my favorite women are supportive of equal rights, and Cheiko Okazaki, for example, Aline Clyde, Amy Brown Lyman, who supported the equal rights in the 1940s. She sent this amazing telegram to her senator and asked him to come out in support of the Equal Rights Amendment. She and her partner, Lucy Grant Cannon, who was the Young Women's President while she was the Relief Society President. So certainly there is a long history of women who are supportive of the Equal Rights Amendment here in our state, leaders that I look up to and certainly have been important to me as I have learned about them through my upbringing in the LDS Church.
Kelly, let's talk about the national scale. Can you give us an update on where we are across the country and what else needs to be done in the work for gender equality?
Absolutely. So we are at an exciting moment of history. We have reached the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. The only thing that really stands in our way is this pesky timeline that was attached to the Equal Rights Amendment in an effort to stop it. And it was effective back when this took place in 1982. Congress did actually extend the timeline for 3 more years. And so what that signals to us is that Congress can make a different choice, and that's happening right now. In the House, our own Senator, Congressman Curtis, voted to remove the timeline on the Equal Rights Amendment, recognizing that it was an arbitrary barrier that could be removed by Congress. They have that power under Article 5, and really usher in equal rights for women at long last. We've waited a considerable amount of time for that to take place. We're so grateful for the allyship of men who stand in support of women, and we need more of that here in our state.
Emily, we have time for final words. I will give it to you.
Great.
What would you like to leave our viewers with tonight?
Yeah, you know, as I think about this and listen to this discussion, it's so great. And I'm imagining that there are a lot of people who wonder, like, gosh, this is so crazy that I don't actually have constitutional equality. Like, it's kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it. And the thing I would say is that is accurate. You know, women and men don't share constitutional equality at this moment. And to get that done, we have to ratify the ERA. We have to fight for that in our state. We have to fight for that at a national level and just be involved, you know. And I think the thing that I would say is if this is something that resonates, that it is time to do something about it, you know, to either join the coalition or let your representatives know that this is something that you care about. It really makes a big difference.
You've been hearing from Emily Bell McCormick, founder of the Policy Project, and Kelly White-Jones, chairwoman of the Utah Equal Rights Amendment Coalition. Thank you both for sharing your perspective with us. We appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll be right back. Welcome to our final In Focus discussion tonight on the Equal Rights Amendment. Rounding out our conversation tonight is Senator Kathleen Rieby from Cottonwood Heights. And Senator Rieby, thank you so much for spending your Friday evening with us.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Senator, you are co-sponsoring a resolution again to ratify the ERA in Utah. Tell us why.
So there's 2 reasons. I have a mom who we lost our dad when we were kind of young. And she was the main provider for our family. And so I wasn't super young, but I was young enough to realize how hard it would be if I was younger and there were more kids in my family. So realizing that my mom now was the breadwinner and she was making less money was really hard for us. The second thing that I think is important is that I have actually done a lot of jobs that are non-traditional. I was trained to be a firefighter, I was a truck driver, a police dispatcher, and also I'm a senator. And so I have been in every room, and I think women should be in every room that men are in. And I think that I have done the jobs that they have done, and I've stood next to them, and I deserve the same pay, and I deserve the same kind of respect that those people are receiving. And so those 2 reasons are the reasons why I think it's important that equal rights is ratified.
I'm going to slide a question in there really quick. This is not the first time that a state lawmaker has tried to sponsor a resolution. I remember Representative Karen Kwan also tried to do it as well. Why does it seem to struggle getting support from the state of Utah?
Well, I think we come into the legislative session deciding what kind of things we're going to work on, and the people that are in charge decided that this is something that they weren't going to let out of committee. And that's unfortunate because 70% of our population really does want equal rights. And so for them to make that decision and not really listen to the will of the people is very distressing to me. So I'm going to run this bill every year until we get some traction on it. And so I'm just going to keep asking because I'm not going to take no for an answer.
As a state lawmaker, what did you observe or learn from the COVID-19 pandemic when it comes to gender equality?
This has been an unbelievable time. It's unprecedented. And as a school teacher, I actually see it on the ground. I see how families are impacted. We have close to 2,700 deaths right now that have happened in the state of Utah. And many of those families are left without a primary earner. And so we have families that are left with one parent. And so this even makes it more important that we have to really protect both family members and both parents so that we can have a family that is able to buy their groceries, take care of the rent, take care of their families. So this pandemic has highlighted how important it is for each family member to have the same earning potential to take care of their families.
Now, a recent topic of conversation is abortion, given the Supreme Court's decision to uphold Texas's ban. One of the arguments from the opposition of the ERA is that it would be used to overturn all restrictions on abortion and mandate taxpayer funding of elective Medicaid abortions, such as what happened in New Mexico and Connecticut. What is your response to this?
Yeah, that is a question that's brought up all the time. And, you know, in Connecticut and New Mexico, that was in 1973, and that's a long time ago. Here in the state of Utah, we have actually passed a lot of laws and bills that put safeguards around abortions so that that would not be happening. So I think that we have to really look to see what great work we've done in the state of Utah to put up those safeguards and not use that as a hurdle to prevent women from being able to provide for their families and have equal pay.
Opponents say that the ERA will not give women any more rights than they currently have, as they already have claim to equal rights through the 14th Amendment and numerous other laws. So why does the ERA still need to be ratified?
Well, it just came out that we're last in the nation for equality. And so if this is really happening, then why are we still measuring who's ahead and who's not? I think we do need a bold move right now in the state of Utah. We talk about our economy and we talk about trying to grow high-paying jobs. And so when people look at the state of Utah and they see it as a state that's not kind to women, it really causes them not to want to come here. So I think it's really a detriment to our economy. It's a detriment to our population. And that's why we really need to take this bold move, pass this, and say Utah is a state that wants to participate in all the equality that every other state is trying to promote.
Senator Rieby, we have 30 seconds left. Final words. What would you like to leave our viewers with, or what's your message to our audience as they're thinking about the ERA?
Well, once again, 70% of our population really believes in this. And then as we look at our daughters and we look at our sisters and our aunts and we think about COVID right now, if they were left without a husband, I want them to protect themselves, and I want them to be able to afford a lifestyle that they already have. And so I need you to reach out to your counties and your cities and your representatives and make sure that you make them aware that you are supporting ERA.
You've been hearing from Senator Kathleen Rieby from Cottonwood Heights. Senator Rieby, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight.
Thank you so much.
And don't forget, we'd love to hear from you about the show. We invite you to join our Facebook group by searching for ABC4 In Focus, or you can send us an email, infocus@abc4.com. We'll be right back.